Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hey, I'm Doc Frank. Welcome to my podcast where every week I'm presenting you authentic, spontaneous and unrehearsed discussions with interesting guests from the rail industry about topics that matter. Make sure you subscribe and tell your friends about it, as this podcast will both educate and entertain them. Thank you for listening. My guest in this episode is Mick Spiers, who's currently living in Melbourne in Australia. Mick has not only a senior position in the railway industry, he is also the founder of the Leadership Project, which combines consulting services in the leadership space, a successful podcast with more than 100 episodes, and a book on first-time leadership. When we spoke, we found a lot of surprising parallels between Mick's leadership business and my own training business. We covered a very wide range of conversation topics, including, for example, how to build new expertise and integrate it with your current job, how to get clear about your purpose, sometimes in retrospect, how to facilitate change in people, how to think about your target audience, how to pivot from a corporate career into becoming a small business owner, and how to combine a senior corporate job with an existing small business. There is something in there for everybody, so I'm sure you will enjoy. Hi, it's Doc Frank. Really quick. If you are a fan of communications-based train control or short CBTC, there's an event coming up in September that you absolutely don't want to miss. It's the first virtual global CBTC conference. It's called CBTC World Summit 2023, and it's happening on the 20th and the 21st of September. There will be 3 sessions of about 6 hours duration each for 3 different global regions, one for Asia Pacific, one's for North and South America, and one's for Europe and the Middle East. So wherever you are in the world, one of those sessions will be during the daytime in your time zone, and you can watch it live for the full 6 hours with 6 presentations. The kicker about this is that all other presentations, including the ones from your own session, will be available for replay via recordings. So that means that if the other session should be in the middle of your night, you can still watch it on demand at a time that's more convenient for you and doesn't interfere with your good night's sleep. The conference is available for registration right now at my training portal under docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I'm putting a lot of effort into this conference. It will be an absolute blockbuster event, and I very much hope to see you there. Mick, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doc Frank, how you doing? It's great to connect with you again, and it's a great pleasure to be on your show today.
Thanks very much. Thanks. I'm so glad you are here. We have met each other back in 2009 when I just migrated to Australia and I joined Thales, and you were there as the manager for sales and marketing, if I remember this correctly. And at the time, yes, you had a management position and you could be considered as a leader. But I had no idea where your passion for leadership would take you. Just give us a bit of an idea what happened after you disappeared to New Zealand for a ticketing project.
Yeah, actually, that's a big turning point in my life, Frank, I got to say. So mobility has always been a huge part of my life, and we can probably unpack that a little bit more as we go along, and there's some reasons behind that. I'm very purpose-driven, and I'm in the urban mobility world with a clear purpose and vision in mind. When I went to Auckland, I was heading over there as the global project director of an integrated ticketing system, and ticketing systems don't always go very well. I think most people know that. There's some pretty publicly available information about some projects that go really well. And in this case, with the Auckland project, we delivered it on time, in full, with a delighted customer, and we even made the company money, which was a nice little added bonus as well. Yeah. And on the surface, Frank, you would probably say that it was a great success. But the question that had to be asked was, at what expense? And there was a huge moment of realization for me. In fact, when I left Auckland and I realized that my leadership style had not set the team up for success. I made lots of mistakes. I was a micromanager. I had my hands over everything. And there was this big dawning realization that I'd become a point of dependency for everyone. I was the answer to every question. If people wanted to know about the schedule, ask Mick. If people wanted to know about the customer, ask Mick. About the design, ask Mick. About requirements, ask Mick. And that was not setting up the team for success at all. I was working 14 to 16 hours a day, living in another country away from my family. There's so many things that on the surface looked incredible and underneath were not good. Yeah. That was what's triggered my desire to learn more about leadership, to understand where I went wrong. And as they say, the rest is history. I've studied deeply psychology ever since. I've become a master certified coach. I've, as you mentioned, written my first book. I have a world-leading podcast. You know, all of these things all stemmed from a realization that I'd made horrible mistakes myself as a leader.
Oh. Yeah, but I mean, you didn't just write a book. I mean, it's quite a journey from coming. You've got a problem yourself, and you kind of feel inadequate, or you realize that what you did in a certain field wasn't perfect to your own standards. And all the way to writing a book about this, where you're basically guiding other first-time leaders to do better than you did in the past, I guess. And for the listeners who don't know, your book has, I think, quite a cheeky title. It's called "You Are a Leader, Now What?" Yeah. So I really like that title. It's a bit challenging. Yeah. But I think this is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a challenge. So tell us a bit more about the story, the journey from basically feeling inadequate to feeling confident enough that you can give other people guidance by writing a book, which is probably the ultimate way of distributing your knowledge to as wide as possible audience.
Yeah, so it's a long journey, in fact, Frank. It wasn't overnight at all, but it started with that realization of the mistakes I'd made as a leader. And then it started to unpack from there. And I started to study psychology deeply. I started to study leadership deeply. I also did an interesting exercise, which is in the book, is I built myself what's called an amalgam leader. I thought of all of the leaders that I'd had in my career up until that point, the inspiring ones, the ones that I loved, the ones that demotivated me and made me feel 2 inches tall. And I unpacked everything. I reflected and I went, what was it about that person that inspired me? What was it about that person that demotivated me? What was it that they did that made me feel disempowered, or whatever the case may be? So the good, the bad, the ugly, I would unpack and go, okay, I really like that. I didn't like this. And it almost made this catalog of things that I would hold myself to account for as a leader, in terms of, these are the values and behaviors that I want to build into my own model of leadership, and these are the behaviors that I'll never do to another human being. So I built this kind of amalgam leader about, you know, what's good and bad in leadership from my own perspective, but I didn't just mimic someone else. I built my own model. So I'm studying all of the psychology, understanding how to influence and inspire people, understanding the important differences between leadership and management, etc. And I'm building all of this up. That led to going, you know, this almost like this fire lit inside me about the passion for leadership that led me down the path of studying coaching to high degrees, master certified coach, going through all of the different levels with the International Coaching Federation, formalizing some of that kind of experiential learning that I'd had, then turning it into formal learning. Then along the same time, of course, and you would remember this, Frank, my career was also going from strength to strength. I started leading regional business. I went to Hong Kong. I went to Singapore. I was leading a global business at one point. So my career was also going on a trajectory. But here's the interesting thing. All the things that I was learning as I was going on that journey, studying deeply psychology and coaching, etc., I was then turning around and I was practicing it in the workplace.
Yeah.
And then I was going, oh, wow, that really worked.
Yeah.
And before you know it, like this momentum built of becoming a leader where other people seemed to want to follow me and they wanted to be part of my teams and they want to be part of the vision that I was creating, etc. So it then became a self-fulfilling prophecy that my career grew as my knowledge and understanding of leadership grew. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I was just thinking about this when you said that when you really have a passion to learn something, to study something, and I don't mean this superficial thing of we all need to be lifelong learners that everybody's talking about, but if you have something where you really want to learn something, where you go proactively in and say, oh yeah, forget about all this other stuff, but leadership in your case, that's the stuff you want to learn, everything there is about it. And then you apply it in your daily practice, and then you realize how much this is helping you. And I could well imagine that it didn't just help you in your career, even though that's already a big thing, but it probably helped you in other areas of your life as well. Because influencing people sounds very manipulative, but influencing people in a way that they actually want to do certain things, like convincing them to do certain things. I mean, this is something that in your daily life that you need to practice with your wife, your spouse, your children, your friends, whether you want to go to the movies or to the football game, things like that. So everything is about influencing, and everything to a degree is about leadership as well.
Yeah, fully right, Frank. And I'm going to build that story exactly as you just said. So my study and deep love of leadership, it gives me so much joy and fulfillment that you don't have to pay me to sit down and study leadership. I'll do that in my own time, and it's almost like this passion project or obsession that I have about studying the human condition, what makes people tick, and how to inspire people. And then if you think about that and how much energy I put into studying psychology because I love it, it's the same thing in the workplace. And you said the word influence. I'm going to add the word inspire. When you inspire someone to do something because they want to do it, not because you told them to do it, the result is always 10 times because they put all of their heart and soul. They're no longer working for a paycheck. They're no longer just doing the bare minimum to make sure that they don't get fired. They're now putting their entire heart and soul into this project because they believe in it.
And this is so important for just making people's lives better. I can remember I worked once on a project and then I stopped working on the project, but obviously the project still went on. And you still remain interested in the project. And I found that every person working on that project that I spoke about later on, if I asked them, what do you think about the project? There was one word that everyone said, and that was toxic. And I mean, how terrible must it be to work for a project like this, which is supposed to be great, like you're creating something new. And especially in the field of railways, I mean, doing a new railway line is just an amazing feat if you think about it. Yeah, like many of us used to play with model railways when we were a child, and now you can build your own one in a scale of 1-to-1, a real thing. And so it could be a lot of fun, it could be a lot of inspiration, it could be one of the highlights of your professional career, if not your life. And then you work in a project environment where the only word or the first word that comes to your mind is toxic, where as negative as it can be. So I think working on something that can improve this for the better is really an extremely virtuous thing. Yeah. So when you when did you actually start? So you said you went to Hong Kong and then you went to Singapore and then you changed companies in between. I think you remained in the area of ticketing for quite a while. When did this actually start? I mean, the studies probably happened aside your career, and you said you did this, and the results of your studies already improved your career. So you started this obviously while you were doing it. So where was the point when you said, I want to focus so much on that leadership thing that there isn't enough space in my world, in my day, for doing the professional career and the leadership passion at the same time?
Yeah, so it did creep up over time, but then there was some trigger moments that brought it to a head, I'm going to say, Frank. So it started back in 2013. That was when I realized I needed to do things differently. And at that point, I'm going to say the learning was a little bit more, hadn't gained momentum yet. But from 2013 onwards, I started this deep study of leadership. I'm going to say it was just for personal benefit at that point. I wanted to be a better leader. I wanted to be a better leader for my team. So it wasn't completely selfish or anything, but it was just about improving me and improving my leadership, et cetera, et cetera. So 2013 kind of builds up and I'm starting to notice, hey, this kind of stuff works. It's really interesting. 2016 to 2019, I'd say that period is when I'm doubling down, I'm starting to put it into daily practice and I'm seeing the results from the team and they're always amazing me, et cetera, et cetera. 2019 is when I moved to Singapore and I did change companies at that time. Same thing. I started having an instant impact at the new company I'd joined because of my values, my beliefs, and my approach to leadership. And I'm getting this kind of building and building and building. Okay, now I need to pause and then talk about this moment that kind of shifts everything. And this is going to talk about why I work in urban mobility at the same time. The reason I work in urban mobility, Frank, is that I want to create a world where people can move freely around their cities without delays, without disruptions, and ultimately without stress, right? And what I was trying to do in my, let's say, professional career was de-stress the way people get to and from work. To de-stress this area where some people don't know whether it's going to take them 40 minutes to get to work or more than 4 hours. And unfortunately, that's not an exaggeration. Look at cities like Manila, Jakarta, Bangkok. Unfortunately, that is not an exaggeration. People really feel that stress every day.
Yeah.
And then the more and more I studied leadership and I started getting into a lot of Gallup research, and I realized that for many people, the stressful part was the time that they spend in the four walls. Not just the commute to and from work, but then they'd arrive at a workplace that is, to use your word, toxic. And what came to me is that we spend, Frank, up to 1/3 of our lives in the workplace, and no one deserves to work in a toxic workplace. We all deserve to work in a place where we feel seen, where we feel heard, where we feel like we matter, where we can replace the word toxic with the word exhilarating. Imagine working on these projects, and you're dead right, Frank, that projects in urban mobility are game-changing. They're amazing feats of engineering. They're amazing feats of teamwork. They're amazing feats that change the world, and they make people's lives better. At the end of that project, do you want to feel exhilarated and proud and look at your teammates and go, wow, that was just amazing?
Yeah.
Or do you want to go, wow, that was toxic. I'm glad I'm out of there.
Yeah.
So that was the moment when I thought about this shift in this temporal expectation that I was spending all of this time de-stressing the way people got to and from work. And I realized that I wanted to also work on de-stressing the time that people spend at work. That was the moment.
It's interesting when you started this off and you at the very beginning of our talk, you mentioned your passion for urban mobility, but I think this insight with the stress and the de-stressing of things came much later, and then suddenly things fall into place, and then you realize, that was it all the time. You just didn't figure it out. It just comes to you at some point in time. And it was a very similar thing to me. I mean, my passion, if you will, is CBTC, communications-based train control. And I had a very rough start getting into this, which was actually at the time when I started at Thales in 2009. And then a month in, there came the CBTC tender out in Sydney, and they were just throwing the thing at me because they said, "Oh, Frank, you're the signaling guy. You were just hired, and we're so glad we have you. And there you go. And now you're responsible for this big, huge CBTC tender." And I had no idea what I was talking about. But at the same time, if you say, I don't know what I'm talking about, the only thing I would have left is basically quit and do something else. And then I'm out of a job after just migrating to a new country with a language that wasn't my native one. And so I basically solved this in another way. And then a few years later, I studied more and I learned more about it. And then I thought, okay, I want to develop a training that basically helps others to have it easier for CBTC than I had it. So very similar to your motivation, I think, for the leadership book, to basically help others to avoid the mistakes that you thought you made yourself. And then after a few years, it dawned on me that it's not just CBTC, or why is it CBTC? And what I'm really passionate in is the improvement of the railways, the increase of the railways capacity that allows a better mobility when the cities are growing. When cities are growing to the point that the railway network is at capacity, you cannot run more trains, and in most cases the limiting factor is really the signaling system, the old style fixed block conventional signaling system. And by introducing something like CBTC, you are getting rid of those limitations. Now you can lift up the capacity of the railway, and it makes the entire thing much more comfortable for passengers, because they don't have to wait that long for the next train. The trains are less crowded because they run more often. So all these kinds of things. And then I thought, yes, that's the real passion. But as in your case with the de-stressing, it just came over time, and it was after years. And then I realized back, this is how I started my career in signaling. I was always sick and tired of my discipline, signaling, being the main limiting factor of a railway. So it basically turned back the clock 20 years or 25 years and said, that was there all the time. I just didn't realize. Yeah.
So you're dead right. And let me reflect on that a little bit. So yeah, for me, it was exactly that. There's been moments in time where I've realized that my purpose in life is that I want to de-stress people's existence so that they live a happier, more fulfilling life. Originally, that was de-stressing their commute. Then it was de-stressing the workplace. And now it's both. I do both now. I de-stress people's commute and I de-stress the workplace. And then listening to you, I mean, yeah, first of all, wonderful growth mindset, Frank, because you get thrown in the deep end back in 2009. You could have just gone, I don't know how to do this, but you didn't. You were resourceful and went, okay, I've got a certain skill set. I now need to apply and grow that skill set because I can do this. You back yourself that you could do this. And now you're paying it back because you're showing others how to do it as well. And then you're dead right about CBTC is a perfect example of this. What are the things in our control that we can de-stress someone's commute so that it is easier? Well, first of all, we don't want disruptions on our network. We want people to get home to their families safely at the end of the day. So we've got two key ones there. We've got no disruptions. We've got safety. Then the next one has to be around capacity, frequency of service, and the dependability that they have on that frequency of service. And one of the things that I always remember in this journey is, and part of this journey coincides with you at different times, Frank, but thinking about going to London, and if you're on the Jubilee line as an example, and you go to the platform and you see that there's a train disappearing into the tunnel because you just missed it. Now, if I think about, let's say, my childhood, growing up, even big chunks of my adult life, your shoulders would slump. You'd go, missed the train. When's the next one going to be? And if you grew up in places like Newcastle or Sydney in Australia, 9 minutes would have been a good answer. Sometimes it would be 15 minutes. Sometimes the next train isn't half an hour or an hour away.
Yeah.
CBTC and the Jubilee line, you watch that train disappear in the tunnel, you look to your right and go, oh, here comes the next train. And that's because of moving block, and that's because of our ability to increase capacity in the line. So yes, the things that we do it for a reason.
Yeah.
We do it to make people's lives easier. We do it so they can get to and from where they need to go safely, dependably, reliably, and with the capacity that it's stress-free.
Mm. This is so tempting for me to just have these two parallel lines now of what you did with leadership and what you're still doing with leadership and what I was doing with CBTC, because the more you get into it, the more you study that topic, the more these insights come to you, and then it basically starts growing from there. And you just mentioned that you want to avoid disruption. So I, as a passenger, as a railway passenger myself, I suffered a lot from shutdowns of the railway network. So when I was late at work and then I wanted to go home and then I realized the trains weren't running. And then, yes, there's normally a bus replacement service, but that means you are probably home, I don't know, half an hour later, minimum. And that's late at night when it's dark out there. I tend to get travel sick on buses, not on trains. So that's another thing which didn't really help my pleasurable journey. So now I basically realized that with a system like CBTC or technology like CBTC, you have the opportunity to deliver it without disrupting any existing services. If you do it right, if you know how to do it. So that was one element that I started adding to my training courses about CBTC, something that I call zero disruption delivery. And then the next thing that I'm just currently working on, which is almost like a convergence, if you will, with your leadership stuff, is then I looked at project and I did a lot of lessons learned exercises on trying to develop patterns where projects can go wrong. And I realized that sometimes you have projects that look perfect from the outside. And that triggered when you spoke about Auckland, yeah? They look perfect from the outside. They are planned properly. They are executed according to the plan, which is not always the case, but it's very helpful if you have a good plan and you execute on it. But still the success of the project is not as it was expected. And then I thought, what is it? What is the next step, the next frontier of where things can go wrong? And I realized that it was mindset. And I think mindset is a very important thing in leadership as well. And you did mention the word already, which obviously was a trigger for me. And the mindset meaning that people, especially if you think about conventional fixed block signaling and then moving to something which is CBTC, which is a very different thing. So it's moving block instead of fixed block. It's cap signaling instead of lights on mast. So in most cases, you get rid of all the signals. And this is such a fundamental shift that all the people had never had before in their career in this dimension. So if you apply the new technology with the mindset of the old technology, the outcome will be inferior. It will be substandard. So now the trick, what I'm currently working on, and I'm actually developed and just started a new training course where I'm looking for examples of an old mindset. What is the associated new mindset that would be more helpful if you want to lift up the capacity of an entire railway? And how do you get from the old mindset to the new mindset? And I'm just imagining, and that's probably leading into my next question to you. I guess there are parallels to what you do in leadership. Where
there are.
You will probably have a similar thing where you say, okay, well, this is something that you don't really want because that's what people don't like. Micromanagement. I just take micromanagement as an example. So now you can't just tell upcoming managers, don't micromanage. I mean, you could, but that doesn't help them very much. So you need to give them something alternative, which still makes them feel good, because not micromanaging means letting go of control. that's a problem. Yeah, for some project managers or leaders, that's an almost existential problem where they need to put trust over to their people without knowing whether they will succeed or not. And so you probably need to give them something new that they can do instead of micromanagement, and you need to give them some help to carefully guide them over from the old to the new one.
So, Frank, you're really edging up to the edge of something really important to talk about. And the word I'm going to leave you with is the word identity. Identity. Now, let me explain what that is about and why it might impact. If you're out there trying to do a technology project in the railways, listen carefully to this because it's really important. All technology projects are also change management projects. You're about to change the behavior of a group of people that might be 30 plus years industry experience in this industry, and they've grown up with certain conventional technologies and they're very comfortable. In fact, you're going to say that they're experts in their field, right? So now you're going to come along, Frank, and you're going to come along with CBTC. You're going to come along with getting away with signals and going to in-cab signaling and moving block instead of fixed block. And you're going to rethink the way train control is done in the operational control center, et cetera, et cetera. If we do that without thinking about the human beings involved, we're going to set ourselves up for failure. Now, where does the word identity come in? These experts, whether they're a train dispatcher, a signaling engineer, the head of an operational control center, I don't care what job they do today, they've grown up doing that job in a certain way, and their identity is as an expert in that field. And now you're going to bring in this new technology, whether it's CBTC or a new train control solution or a traffic management solution, whatever it is, they're not the expert anymore.
Yes.
They're not the expert anymore.
Yes.
It's a challenge to their identity.
Yes.
So if you don't bring them on that journey and you describe to them that you go, okay, here is our current position. At the other end of this project, the bridge that we're about to cross, this is what the world is going to look like. And by the way, your identity is going to be intact at the other end of this journey. And you're then going to be the expert in the new technology, and you're going to be the one that makes a difference in the world, et cetera, et cetera. If you ignore that, all you're going to get is resistance. Oh, you don't understand railways. We don't do that like here, around here, etc. You're going to get a lot of pushback if you don't address the human beings and their identity. How does that sit with you?
I'm smiling ear to ear because it sounds like you've read the outline of my training course on mindset. I'm touching exactly on those things. I give you a little story before. When I did the planning of CBTC here in Perth, I had one project team member whose job title was change manager. And by education, he was a psychologist. And I said in a joking way, well, I have to be careful around you what I'm saying, yeah, because you will start interpreting things and basically tell me what's wrong with my brain or with my way of thinking or something like that. So what happened after I left the project? The change manager was gone within a week or two, because the new project manager, which came in replacing me, looked at this and said, well, this is not a railway person. This is not a signaling person. This is not what's he doing there? And then he spoke to some other people, and then you see these typical things. Oh, well, he's a shrink, right? He's a psychologist. He's talking about all these woo-woo things like, how do you think? And we need to change this. And I don't want people to change my thinking. So there was all this resistance stuff that you just mentioned. Now, from this experience, when I thought about now, how do I set up this training course? How do I deliver this? Look, I am not a psychologist, so clearly, and I don't want to be one either. So people may disqualify me from the get-go and say, well, this guy's not a psychologist. How can he talk about mindset? But what I do have is the railway understanding. and the understanding of the situation of the human being that is exposed to that change. What you just said, somebody who was the super guru in the old field, and suddenly he's got these young people who has worked for 3 years on CBTC running circles around him. The identity, the status of the super expert is not just threatened, it's thrown in the dust. It's no longer there. And so what happens often if there is no guidance to show these people a new way, how to get into ideally a similar status as an expert, maybe not guru. I don't like that term at all because it always puts people on a pedestal, but an expert in the new technology, you need to guide them there. If you don't do that, and if you don't even realize that this might be a problem, you leave them in the old world, and what's happening is they're getting defensive. They're getting very defensive. So they're defending their old ways, because as long as they can maintain the old ways, they also maintain their status as the expert that everybody's looking up to. So
1,000%, 1,000%, Frank. And I'll just add a couple of little things on there, and that is, whenever you're doing any change, whether it's technology change or a process change in your company or whatever the case may be, you always need to think about a few things, which is who's benefiting from not changing and who stands to lose from this change. And I'm not talking about finances. I'm still talking about identity. So who is benefiting from not changing? The person that's the expert in the current technology. What do they stand to lose from the change? They stand to lose their identity. And remember, the human brain is hardwired in some respects to avoid loss. Our fear of loss is greater than our appreciation of gain.
Yes.
So just telling them about the gain is also not necessarily going to get there. Unless you address the elephant in the room, which is their fear of loss of identity, you won't shift them. Yeah. So you need to have the conversations.
Yeah.
In terms of psychology, you don't have to be a trained psychologist or a certified psychologist, but you do need to understand human behavior, change management, and identity, and then you can help people with this transition. If you ignore it, they will push back.
And you need empathy for them, which is very important. And you need to talk their language as well, where I think it's helpful that I'm coming from the signaling space as well. So people consider me as one of their own.
Hi, this is Doc Frank. Let me jump in here right now to tell you about a new training which is called High Capacity Signaling Blueprint. This is a very unique all-in-one training that gives you everything you need to know about high capacity signaling. The foundations, where you can compare what conventional signaling is to what high capacity signaling is with all the necessary definitions. Then we look at CBTC, communications-based train control, as the prime technology for high capacity signaling and how this is done. In the third part of the training, we look at varieties of the European Train Control System, ETCS, another global train control technology, and how this can be used to achieve high-capacity signaling. And then at the end of the training comes an actual blueprint how to apply CBTC or ETCS to get a real high-capacity outcome for your railway. It's basically 3 training courses in one, and as usual for my trainings, there is a study group available for joint learning with other people taking the same training. And after the training, you will get into an alumni community, which is exclusive for my training students, where you can ask questions and get them answered by myself on an ongoing basis for a guaranteed minimum of 12 months. You can sign up on my usual training platform, which is docfranktraining.podia.com/HCS Blueprint. I said it again, docfranktraining.podia.com/HCS Blueprint, with HCS being the acronym for High Capacity Signaling. If it's important for you to learn about the latest trend in railway signaling, which is high capacity signaling, then this is the training for you.
Talking about language, tell us a little bit about Rachel and Sean. Who are they?
Oh, that's a great question, Frank. And when you write a book, and this is something for everyone out there that might have a book inside them. And by the way, lots of people have got great books inside them, and you just need to sit down and think about get it out of your head. Yeah, there you go, Frank.
Planning for years. I know a title, everything. Sorry, keep going.
All right. Okay. So Rachel and Sean are the avatars of my book. Now, when you write a book, the key to writing the book is actually to have one person in mind, and deeply understand them and deeply understand what it is about them, what is their current state, and what do you want them to think and do differently or even feel differently at the end of reading your book. So I did that. I deeply developed this character called Rachel, and she was loosely based on a real person, by the way, but it wasn't her real name. You know the person, by the way, Frank. All right. So it was loosely based on a real person, and I changed the name to Rachel to protect the innocent. And I really thought about that person when they were a first-time leader, and what was it that they needed to know that could accelerate their transition through the roller coaster. So the roller coaster is the ups and downs. You're in your first time leadership role. You're feeling very proud. You got this euphoria that you've finally been promoted into your first leadership role. And then comes the thud of anxiety. And it literally is anxiety for some people.
Oh, yeah.
Where you realize that no one has shown you what it means to be a leader. So I had to, because by the time I'm reading the book, remember, I'm now a seasoned leader. I've developed some pretty deep competencies and skills. I had to wind the tape back and go, right, let's think about that first-time leader. What is it that they don't know that if they did know, they might be able to accelerate on their path? And I called that person Rachel, even though it wasn't their real name. Sean, I realized that there was a secondary audience for my book, and that is senior leaders that are looking to mentor the next generation of leaders. And often they feel lost as well. They want to help, but they don't know how to start. So Sean was my avatar of I'm a 50-year-old, same as me, 50-year-old senior manager who wants to mentor the next generation of leaders, but still has to go through a bit of self-awareness themselves and realize that they themselves made mistakes as they went on their journey. How are they going to mentor the next generation to learn from those mistakes? And sometimes, unfortunately, people have to scrape their own knees to learn the lesson. But how can I help them? How can I be there for them? How can I coach them so they accelerate up the continuum of leadership? So that's who Rachel and Sean are. Both real people. Both names have been changed to protect the innocent.
This is extremely interesting. I heard about this avatar concept several times from several people out there, some of them very famous, very successful. But it's the first time that I heard it that the two avatars are not just male and female, which in itself is probably a differentiation enough, especially including if you talk about leadership roles, because I think as a woman in the leadership role, especially in the first leadership role, you may face quite distinctly different problems from a first-time male leader. But you're going actually a step further. You basically have your two avatars on two completely different levels of their careers and their ambitions, what you want to take out of that journey. So that's extremely interesting. So what I found in the development of my own training courses was I didn't really like this concept of investigating and studying your avatars based on demographics, like how many children have they got, which suburbs do they live in, how much money do they earn. And I said, well, I never thought that was really relevant. For some people it might be, but for me it wasn't so much. But for me it was more like, how do they approach a training course of mine? What's their intention? What do they want to get out of it? Which seems to be very similar to what you just said. And I'm just realizing it, and now more than ever, after you said this, describing your two avatars, that I probably need to think about different people as well at different points in their career and with different levels of knowledge. Because my training courses, I have set them out from the get-go by saying, I want to teach people who start from absolutely zero. Not just zero knowledge on CBTC, but what about zero knowledge about signaling? So, and I basically developed the training courses so that somebody who is completely clueless about signaling, maybe even about relays in the first place, can come to the training and still understands the stuff. So, especially, and I thought that's a valuable thing, because especially for people who have no clue about signaling, and maybe they even have been to a signaling training before, and they found that it's went right over their heads because of all the lingo, of all the acronyms throwing around. Well, I'm sure everybody knows them. So if a trainer doesn't wind back, as you said, by saying, okay, well, where are these people in their journey and how do I get them up there? So when they, and most signaling trainings, to be fair, most signaling trainings are there to have signaling people becoming better signaling people. So it's justified in those cases that a lot of stuff is already assumed that they know. But if you have a beginner then and you assume a lot of things that they are supposed to know, but they don't know them, it's going over their head, and then they think, signaling is a dark art, I'm too stupid for that, whatever. On top of that comes CBTC being the allegedly most complicated and sophisticated of all the signaling technologies, and people get completely scared away. And I said, okay, well, I want to do something against that. I really want to demonstrate how people without any signaling knowledge can still understand the supposedly most difficult to understand signaling technology. And that worked. But then at the same time, the majority of people coming to my trainings were signaling people. Sometimes signaling people with significant experience. And I think the turning point for me came early this year when I had a person at my training and we did the introductions, and he said, yeah, I've been working in the field of CBTC for 20 years. And I thought, oh my God, this is terrible, because this person will know everything already, and he will not like the training course. He will say, this training course is shit, I didn't learn anything. And I thought, that's a problem. But it wasn't. So at the end of the training, I asked him, I said, well, I mean, with all your CBTC experience, what do you think about the training? And he said, you know what? If I had your training course 10 years earlier, I could have avoided so many mistakes in my projects over the last 10 years. It's not funny. So, and then I thought, wait a minute. So I have a training that works for non-signaling people, for absolute beginners. But at the same time, it also works for people with 20 years of experience, not just in signaling or in CBTC. So I cannot approach these two people with the same concept. So there needs to be something in there for everybody. And this is really where it struck me when you explained to me what Rachel and Sean are and where they are at different levels of their career. And I'm so super glad I asked you that question, because I was just assuming Rachel and Sean are just the male and female version of the same avatar. Yeah.
Different people altogether. Yeah. So let's address a few of the things that you said. So demographics, where demographics, and demographics is not singling in on a single person. It's more generic, let's say. I think that's really important if you're trying to sell to, let's say, selling a consumer product. I think it's really important for you to understand your demographics. When we're talking about something that's very individual and changes people's lives like this, you need to get deeper into a single avatar, or in both our cases now, Frank, I'm going to say two avatars, a junior mentee and a senior mentor, if you like, someone that's got a bit more experience. And if you get into their mindset and their psyche before the program, you can then start devising the right strategy. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand, what do they think, feel, and do today? including you brought up something interesting. What do they think, feel, and do today? What are their limiting beliefs? So if they go into the program thinking that, oh, CBTC is the most complex thing in the world, I can't do this, you need to know that. And you need to address that elephant in the room early on to go, yes, it is complex, but you can do it.
Yeah.
Or it is complex, but it's not as complex as you think it is. And if you get to the basics and you get to the principles, you can too do this as well. So think about what they think, feel, and do today, including any limiting beliefs that might be holding them back. And what do you want them to think, feel, and do after they've finished your program? And if you can answer both those questions, you're going to do an amazing program, Doc. And I know that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm enjoying this conversation a lot. I knew beforehand that it would be great, but it has turned out to be much greater specifically to my own situation, as you could possibly imagine. One thing, I'm conscious that we don't have a lot of time left, but one thing I definitely still wanted to address is where you made the jump out of your corporate career saying, I'm doing that stuff full time. I mean, what we didn't talk about at all is you are a podcaster as well. And most people already realize that probably from your whole setup. If you have a microphone like this and you're wearing headphones, then you're not an amateur like me. You're a professional podcaster. And if I counted correctly, or the last that I heard of was that you've done 119 episodes, which is as I do weekly episodes, but you started 2 years earlier, so that's just what it happens. But you have done more than 100 episodes in a podcast, and that puts you into a very elite circle, because most podcasts are quitting much earlier than that. So congratulations for doing that. But now back to the actual question. How did you find the courage? That's probably the best way of phrasing it. How did you find the courage to leave a successful corporate career, which went from strength to strength, and saying, for a certain period of time at least, I forget about all that, which also means you're forfeiting your income from that, and are fully focused on what's my passion, on writing a book where you've got no idea how much money, if any, that will ever bring you. You're doing a podcast, which may earn you a lot of money, but in most cases it doesn't. So where did you find this courage, and what made you do this jump?
I'm gonna say three things, Frank. It's a great question. Three things are this. I was following my purpose. So when I was following my purpose, it made it important to me. I knew I was going to throw everything at this, my heart and my soul, going to put all of my energy in this to make it successful. So the first thing was the purpose and the passion. The second thing was the business plan. I had a pretty darn good business plan. And what I'd been doing before I left corporate, I'd already built an audience. I'd already built people that were engaged and were interested in my services. Then I had a business plan that I'm going to say that business plan came, I'm going to say close to 80 to 90% true. There were a few things. So no business plan survives the cut and thrust of daily business, but I'm going to say 80 to 90% of it came true. So I had a good business plan.
Wow.
And the third thing is I had a backup plan. You can talk about release management on a railway and talk about a rollback plan. I had a rollback plan. So I also had the confidence that if things didn't go as well as it did, that I would have a fallback plan that I could rely on. And that was it. And the fourth pillar of all of that was an incredibly supportive family, particularly my wife, who backed me 100% and was there with me every step of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. How much, I mean, still the business plan, yes or no? And I find 80 to 90% realization of the business plan is an exceptional number, which I think most of the global companies don't even get it right. But still, the risk, I mean, if you're on your own, if you're a bachelor and you live in a tiny apartment and you've put money aside for the last 10 years or so, then doing for a while without it to follow your passion may sound fantastic. But if you have a family, if you have a wife and kids to feed, it's a very different thing. And maybe you've got a mortgage and all kinds of stuff where if money dries up for an extended period of time, it may really become an existential problem. So with regards to your backup plan, how much time, if you can recall this, how much time did you give you for saying, okay, I'm going full throttle into this new thing. I've got my business plan. I know what I've got to do. I've got an audience. I've got some first consulting or coaching gigs.
Yeah.
This much time. And if it didn't work out by then, and you probably have set certain targets as well, if I clearly missed those targets before it becomes a real economic problem, I'm falling back to my backup plan. How much time did you give you for that?
I had 3 years runway because I had enough capital to run for 3 years. And that 3 years became a sliding 3 years, if you like, because I got to say in the first few months of the business, I started to generate revenue very quickly, faster than I expected. And then it plateaued for a while. So my 3 years actually became a sliding 3 years, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I gave myself 3 years runway to make it successful.
Now, what probably made it even more difficult is that if I calculate this correctly, the timeline, a lot of those 3 sliding years fell into COVID. So
nearly all of it was in COVID.
How did this affect your the realization of your plan, shall I say? Because for a lot of people, including myself, as it's well known for people who follow me on LinkedIn, things fell very much in a heap during COVID. So my own business collapsed by 90%. That's 90 during COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, the first year of COVID, it was a 90% drop in revenue, and if I had been responsible for a number of other employees, not just me, I probably would have to close doors, to be honest. Yeah, so I mean, if it's just yourself, probably in a similar situation as you basically calculate what your capital reserves are and how long you can keep going without substantial new income. But it was extremely hard, and it was extremely hard for a lot of people. So I'm not claiming I'm the only one who suffered during COVID. Many people lost their jobs, and many business owners had to close shop, like cafe owners who were dependent on come. But let's not go there. How did COVID, or to what extent did COVID affect what you were doing? And would you think that things would have been significantly different or significantly better had we not had COVID?
Yeah, interesting question, Frank. So all of this pretty much was during COVID and then outside COVID. Like it started during COVID and then it came out the other end. So if I think about that, I'm going to say that COVID was both a positive and a negative from a business perspective. So I think about some of the programs that I was doing. I'd be doing leadership programs where I would have people in the US, in Italy, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in the Philippines, in Australia, in New Zealand, all on the same program, virtually.
Yeah.
And they learnt so much from each other. And this was some of the feedback that we got, is that they said, well, the program was amazing, but what was also amazing is they were in these little cohorts where they were learning from someone that was in the US and the way that they do business in the US, and someone in Singapore. They learnt so much culturally from each other as well. So the positive was the virtual nature. The negative was it was very hard to book in-person events during all of that, obviously. And then that then became the pivot, because then what happened, I'm going to say mid last year was a big pivot, but it started a little bit before that as well. From about August last year, particularly in Australia now, the Australian market, there was this eagerness to go, oh, can we get back to in-person? So I had to pivot the other way. Yeah. I'd established my business very successfully virtually, and now all of a sudden the demand for in-person increased. So I had to pivot the other way. Yeah. So I'm going to say that we rode the COVID wave very well. The one bit that didn't go as well, I'm going to say this openly in case there's anyone in the audience that is thinking about going off and starting their own thing. The thing that was probably the most shocking to me, and maybe I should have foreseen this having spent so much time in corporate, but it's something, and used the word empathy before, Frank, that I'm going to ask people here for empathy around this, is how bad multinational companies are at paying their bills.
I didn't expect you saying this at all. Yeah, that's wow.
Very bad, right?
Wow.
So, and it seems the bigger the company is, I'm talking multi-billion-dollar enterprises, the bigger the company, the slower they are at paying their bills. And then when you're a family-owned business with a small staff of 6 people, where you're trying to put food on everyone's table, and there's a big multi-billion-dollar company that hasn't paid their bill in 8 months, and the people that you're talking to in the multinational, they're all very pleasant, like accounts payable and all this kind of stuff. They're all very pleasant.
Yeah.
But to them, there's no burning bridge. There's no compelling thing. For you, it's, oh my God, you're watching your bank balance, right? So that's probably the biggest lesson learned that I didn't think of before I started, is just how slow multinational companies are in paying their bills.
This is a shocker. I didn't expect you saying this. I thought you would be saying something like that companies were retracting during COVID and the trainings budget shrunk because they were focusing on the bare necessities or so. But payment quality, that was a real surprise. And what I want to say now, just for the record, so I did say it, I would like to thank all of my clients that they never gave me a problem like this. I've been grateful all the time, but I think it's now really due to say this out loud, because as you just confirmed, it's not a given. It's not normal. Yeah. And please, that doesn't mean that more clients should adopt those practices of basically letting small enterprises hanging out to dry, because that's what it is. If they don't pay you for 8 months, it could be threatening your entire company, your entire business. And after they receive value from you, I don't really think that's a very ethical thing to do. But that's a different thing. Right. Yeah. How do I end this on a high note? Yes, I know. So you briefly mentioned you went back into corporate, and you didn't mention this, but you basically did say earlier that you now these days, you combine the two things. You combining your passion for leadership with a corporate career. So tell us a bit about this, and then we can end this on a high note, Mick.
All right, brilliant, Frank. So yes, I have gone back into the big bad world of urban mobility with a twist. And the first twist is that I still do the leadership project. So on the side, I'm still doing the podcast. I'm still coaching. I'm still writing books. All of these things are still occurring. The reason why I went back in is I got approached by a company who is a world leader in the mobility space. So I got the ability to go back and do the urban mobility stuff that I love. But then during the interview process, all of the challenges that they spoke to me about were all leadership challenges, Frank. They weren't technology challenges. It's the kind of company, and I won't say that they're unique in this, but it's very special, kind of company that I feel like they could solve any technology challenge put to them, but they were having leadership challenges. So I saw the ability to get back to the technology I love, urban mobility, de-stressing the way people get to and from work, but then to improve the workplace and to address the leadership challenges that they were having. So it was like the perfect collision of my two worlds, and it got to the point where I couldn't refuse. So there you go. I'm back in corporate. We've got one foot in each camp in some respects, but I'd say that 80% of my, probably more than that, 80 to 90% of my mental space is given towards that company now. But it's this collision of urban mobility and leadership that attracted me, and I couldn't refuse.
What I found quite impressive about this, and we did speak about this briefly before when we had our pre-chat, was I asked you the question, how it still works, whether you need to completely stifle your existing business. And you basically said, no. You have the permission from your employer to do all these things, to keep doing all those things on the side. And exactly the same thing would apply to me if I was to start a new corporate job today. I do have an existing life. I do have an existing business. And if somebody wanted me to give all of that up for a number of years or maybe indefinitely, they would have to pay me so much money. It's unbelievable. I would basically jump right off their normal frame for the payment structures, because I would probably earn more money than their CEO. But the trick is basically to get established people like you and I back into the workforce, is to acknowledge that those people have a life that they don't want to throw away, because in most cases it's some work of passion, leadership for you and my training business on my side. And unless you can integrate this into the new setting and basically have you and I working for them without having to give up our identity that we built up over years and our business identity, our passion for certain things, it's not going to work, or it's not going to work very well. So that's an important thing, I believe, to create an inspiring and motivating working relationship.
There's an important element there, which is the word boundaries. So it's not without boundaries, right? So clearly they are my first port of call. They're my first thought. All of my priority is and energy is towards them. They're paying me a good salary, and they get my thought patterns, all of these things, right? And then the boundary as clearly off bounds is anything that would be a conflict of interest. So anything, not going anywhere near any competitor, for example, with anything that I do. And then there's the word mutual benefit. And the mutual benefit is like, have a look at my podcast, Frank. On my podcast every week, I get thought leaders from all around the world that are at the top of their game. And I get to have a one-on-one interview with people like Dr. John DeMartini and people like Rich Davini. It's like these are beyond experts. These are, I don't know how you can describe just how far they are in terms of their thought leadership and leadership. Yeah. I get these one-on-one discussions with them where I feel at the end, the audience benefits too, but I feel like I had a one-on-one lesson from this amazing thought leader. So the mutual benefit is I'm continuing to grow as a leader, and I take all of those leadership lessons back to me when I'm in the corporate gig.
Yeah. And I had exactly the same thing, even when I was still working as a consultant, and I did pretty much a full-time job for the work here in Perth. But in parallel, I also did work in Sydney and in Melbourne and in Brisbane. And my employer at the time, or my manager at the time, explicitly permitted me to doing that because it gave me the perspective and the currency of knowledge to understand, and that basically feedback into my organization in Perth, what's happening elsewhere in Australia, what's best practice elsewhere in Australia, not just like 10 years ago when I worked in these other cities, but today. What are they doing today? And what works over there and what doesn't work so well over there? And how can that feed into the thing? And it's similar to what you just described with your podcast interviews and ongoing studies and training courses and coaching clients and so on. Yes, of course, conflict of interest, that should go without saying. To me, that's an ethical thing. And by being a member of Engineers Australia and the IRSE, I've got several codes of conducts to follow, and pretty much everything said don't do anything unethical. And if there's the risk of a conflict of interest, just raise your hand, address it, and then it can be sorted. But yeah, that's extremely important. But at the same time, I mean, one approach would be a very radical one. So you basically have to stop breathing, because any breath you take could be construed into conflict of interest. So that's the extreme way. Obviously, you can't do that. But so there is certainly the necessity to set the boundaries, to say where are the boundaries, and that the boundaries are reasonable for you and allow you to do your things to to an ethical extent inside those boundaries. So they are not too restrictive. Yeah.
Boundaries and mutual benefit. If you work on boundaries and mutual benefit, you can make it work.
Yes. That's probably the perfect closing statement for this interview. Mick, I have enjoyed this so much. I had no idea how it would develop into that thing about CBTC, and I'm always happy to talk about this. And I thought, no. With Mick, I'm talking leadership, and that's it. And maybe podcasting a bit. But it developed into almost two parallel lines talking about tracks and urban mobility. So two parallel tracks of, I think, very comparable things from different words. And I believe, well, I hope that makes it even more interesting for a wider audience and for people who may find these parallel lines in their own lives. Yeah, not necessarily with CBTC and leadership, but maybe with a couple of other things that are of more interest to them. So thank you very much for your time. I think it showed that we had at least one experienced podcaster on the show. I think that interview went extremely well and extremely smooth. And thank you very much. I wish you all the best for your dual track career in corporate and in your leadership project, because I think what you're doing is really, really important for people's careers and also for people's lives. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Frank. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for what you do as well and having these conversations that are important and worth having. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So to all the listeners, you know the spiel. If you like that episode, I think there are a few others out there. This is not the first time today that I'm saying that's the best episode I ever did. So, and everything has a bit of truth. So there are other episodes out there which are equally awesome, just in a slightly different way. So check them all out. If you like that podcast, tell your friends and colleagues about it, because you will be doing them a favor and they will thank you for that. And if you subscribe, and what I also should say, check out Mick's podcast, which is called the Leadership Project Podcast, because I think that's definitely worth listening to as well, especially if you are an aspiring leader. Learn from the best. The book title I should also mention, it's You Are a Leader, Now What? And you can certainly find this on all the usual things. And if you have struggled finding any of this, just go onto Mick's website, which is mickspiers.com. And I think I now did all the plugs that you didn't do out of I don't know, well, good behavior or something like that. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and I see you next week. And until then, keep it simple and bye for now.
Hi, this is Doc Frank from the studio. I want to inform you about my latest and greatest training development, and it is all about the mindset of a high capacity railway organization. What I found in my experience of training and consulting is that often you have projects for new technology which seem to be perfectly planned, which are very well executed, and they still don't lead to the success that was expected. And very often the reason for that is mindset. Key stakeholders that have what I call a legacy mindset, an outdated old ways of thinking, where the new technology is treated in the same way as the old one, but it's just not suitable to get the most out of the new technology. What I'm offering in this training course, which is called High Capacity Railway Mindset, is that every month there's a new training module with 5 examples of an outdated legacy mindset, the suggestion of a new mindset more suitable for a high capacity railway, and how to get from the old to the new mindset. So those modules will be repeated every month for an entire year. So in total, we are talking about 60 different examples how to get from an old mindset to a more suitable new mindset. And the cost for this is only $10 per example. So this can be paid monthly, this can be paid for a year. And then you have the usual service of an alumni community afterwards where you can ask ongoing questions for at least 12 months after the training. You find more information and you can sign up on my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com/mindset. I hope I see you at this training. It's really leading edge stuff. Nobody else in the world is training on this. And if you really want to explore the ultimate frontier of success in technology projects, then this is the training you need to take.
Hey, Doc Frank here again. How did you like this episode? Make sure you subscribe to get informed about future episodes and check out the older episodes too, because all of them are awesome. Tell your friends about it. They will thank you for it. Thank you for listening. Bye for now and see you next time.